With the swine industry, there's a bit of a story, probably two steps. First one is when I first started working with pigs, and that was actually at the university. So first at the university in the Netherlands, my home country, where I started working with pigs, looking at feedstuffs, and then followed it up with doing research at the University of Illinois. In October '96, I moved to Canada and started working with John at Prairie Swine. Basically in our research lab, together with the people in the lab, we work on three areas of research. One of the key ones is working with feedstuffs, so really characterize novel feedstuffs and see how they can potentially work into a feeding program. Mostly we look at nursery pigs and grow finished pigs. A second area of research is really trying to understand what starch and fiber are doing in the pig gut. And so in part we're doing that for pigs, the way they work in the agricultural industry as well. But for that research we basically also use the pig as a model for humans. And then the final area of research is we really like to be able to screen many samples of ingredients in the lab using lab-based technologies. So think of in vitro digestibility, think of NAR, and so that's the third line of research that we're working with. The enormous role that the exchange rate plays, between the Canadian and the US dollar. The important role that for the Canadian pork industry that the export market plays, and that we as a collective being involved in the pork industry keep on having access to export markets. Like, this is very important for the Canadian pork industry, I think, and the whole pricing system and mechanism that's probably a tougher one to still to solve. So those are some of the things that I've observed, and then there's other things like what a feed costs. Of course, is always an important part. What is happening with diseases, new diseases that appear. Here in Western Canada, we have a very unique physical climate and agronomic system that is quite different from Eastern Canada and the US. And absolutely, I get questions asked about, well, how do we raise and produce pigs here in Alberta, and what are the feedstuffs that you're using, and how do you make best use of those feedstuffs? And due to the small grains that we have in our feeding program, it means that the fat inside the pork is this really nice white color. And for certain export markets, that's tremendously important. What is the color? How does it taste? And so that's, for example, very unique here in Western Canada compared to Eastern Canada and the US. And so particularly in export markets, that's where we can, that's where we actually get paid for that intrinsic value that is in the pork industry. We're a big part of the puzzle, and how do we feed the planet? And then of course areas around here are then in the pig industry, how can we keep on in a cost-effective way have a sustainable swine industry here in Western Canada, sustainable not only environmentally and socially, but also economically, so that the primary industry needs to earn their living too. And so that's one thing I like to see continue to highlight, it is that the economics play a key role as well, and that's where hopefully I then play a little part on the feed cost side of things. That the information that we generate in our lab help to better use local feedstuffs and end up having a cost-effective feeding program here in Western Canada. What I really look forward for getting from committee members is their honest opinion, and how do they see the world. And so number one, be involved would be one, but also then in a nice way express what are your views. If you don't have a system like that, I think you lose traction, you lose novelty, and you don't create new and better things to move forward. I've lived now in Australia, I lived in the US, and I've lived in Canada. And I grew up in a country that is, if you drive from here to Red Deer, you go across the country. And so I always saw myself living somewhere, at least for part of my life, abroad. And I quite enjoy being here in Canada. I think it's a fantastic country, lots of space, nice people. And so I'm quite happy here.